All right, 3, 2, 1. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What's going on, Sheikh? Good to see you.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Good
Alhamdulillah.
to come up to MIC and see you. When I first saw you on the TISA, Zoom call that we did for class, I assumed you were just a few years older than me, to be honest. I didn't think that you were an imam and you got kids and stuff is going on in your life. I thought you were just a fellow classmate.
Hold on. So you're assuming that if I don't have a wife and kids, I don't have anything going on in my life? Is that what?
Well, I mean, I thought you were like me. You just a single dude, studying Islam, and then also has probably working, doing something. So that's what I assumed was the situation. But you're working at you're the YQ successor.
No.
No?
I work at the same masjid that YQ did, yeah, but there's no successor.
Okay. So there's like there's a couple of imams here, mashallah, at MIC. There's so you're a co-imam.
Kind of. Yeah, it's not a co. We're just imams, helping each other out.
Mashallah. And there's 3 of you.
Yeah. So myself, Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, and Sheikh Yasser Fazaga.
Mashallah. That's solid, mashallah. Yeah, I'm from small town America. I'm not familiar with the co-imam setup. Where I'm from, there's one imam per masjid, or if there's an imam, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say if they have an imam. Some masajid, miskin, they're like, whoever from the community, ta'al, lead prayer.
Part time. Yeah, he's not officially designated. He just shows up when he can. So, alhamdulillah, mashallah. And it's a very, very large masjid, mashallah. This is the setup you got here. You got like 6 doors to get in. There's like I'm coming in here and I'm seeing there's like multiple rooms. There's a massive ballroom which is right down from here. There's the sister side which is upstairs, and it's very, very progressive actually. I've been to masajid where the sister side is heavily tinted. There's you can't even see what's in there. This mashallah, it's like, okay, there's glass, but you could see. Yeah. And it's not like, oh, you see a girl, I'm like, oh, astaghfirullah, haram, you know what I mean? So it's I like the setup, and there's obviously no designated woman's entrance. I mean, I don't know if that's really a big deal anyway, if there was, but I'm just saying, like, it's you got a progressive setup going on. Who's in charge here? Is that you? You did this?
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it progressive, right? A progressive message would look very different than this.
Yeah, the term probably isn't a good term because people use it in different ways.
Yeah.
Like there's the Muslims for Progressive Values Movement, MPV, and they got all kinds of stuff going on. So
yeah,
but this is, I would say, maybe modern. I think the term that Sheikh Asaqadi uses is progressive traditionalists.
No, forward thinking
traditionalists. That's right. That's right. Yeah. I think a classmate changed it to yeah. Someone changed it to PT instead of FT.
Yeah.
So
forward thinking traditionalist. Sure. I mean, that's fine. Whatever the label. We're not. The thing is, we're not labeling ourselves. We're just doing what we think is good for the community.
No, I hear you.
This was the setup before I showed up. But I don't see a problem in it. So we have many sisters that will pray upstairs. You know what I mean? In that place. Some sisters will come and pray behind the men here in the main musalla. It's not a problem. Obviously, on the day of Friday, that it gets extended way back, so you saw like the sisters are way back there, or they can pray upstairs. That's not a problem.
And then you also mentioned that you guys did have Thanksgiving. That would cause an outrage in the community that I'm from. I like to just prod a little bit, so I drop happy Thanksgiving in the community chat, and instantly right after someone calls me and says, "Oh, Brother Rashid, what you're doing is wrong." And so it seems like you guys are further ahead in terms of Islam and modernity. So can you just talk about that? Like, how did you get to this stage?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call Thanksgiving modern.
Right. Modern for the small town America.
Right. Well, I was also gonna say, like, the actual proper term now is Native American Heritage Day, or something along those lines. They're changing it, because Thanksgiving has negative connotations for Native Americans. But anyways, we didn't. So what we did was, every year before COVID. So this is before I came to MIC, just to be clear.
Yeah.
This predates me, but I don't see a problem with it necessarily. Some people want to, and the thing is, like what you said, some people, if they hear you celebrating, Thanksgiving, a'udhu billah, this is bid'ah, haram, all these things. I get where they're coming from, right? I understand. Yani, if you want to be super strict, only the 2 Eids, etc. Mesh. Are we doing it as a Eid? Are we celebrating, this? It depends, yani, on what it is that you're calling to. Obviously, we're not going to celebrate Christmas. We're not going to do Halloween or anything like that, or Easter. Thanksgiving is one of those that's more of a national thing.
Yeah. Can we talk just about the specifics about why some people consider it haram? I understand there's the hadith about the 2 Eids,
No.
right? And what they take that as is, okay, that's it. Muslims celebrate these 2, nothing else. And then there's another paradigm that says that, those are the 2 religious ones, and then we're allowed other ones in terms of secular holidays. And so just if you could just share a little bit about that, because the understanding that I'm familiar with is that there's one way of seeing it in terms of the 2 religious holidays, and then there's and that's just religious. That's what we do for religious holidays, and then you could do whatever you want with anything else. So what do you think about that?
So there's this idea that Islam is anti-celebration, right? And this is wrong. In fact, many of the Sahaba celebrated multiple things. You're allowed to celebrate the birth of a child through an aqiqah. You're allowed to celebrate your wedding, through a whatever. You're allowed to celebrate pretty much anything that's worthy of celebration. So we even have narrations where Umar ibn Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, when he finally finished at a very old age memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, he was so happy that he slaughtered an animal, invited people for a walima, for like a meal. So celebrating is fine. Would a person say, oh, this is bid'ah? Why are you celebrating, memorizing one surah? None of the, well, the thing is, he's the companion. He's the one who's, like, I'm not saying that he's legislating, but I'm saying that he's doing something that, is allowed to do. So Islam isn't inherently against celebrations. Islam tells us that there has to be a reason, a cause to do something, along those lines. So something like Thanksgiving, what does a celebration entail aslan? Even from an American point of view, I'll tell you, from a purely American point of view that has no religious connotations, neither Christian nor Islamic nor Jewish, right? Are people celebrating, what is the celebration of Thanksgiving? A lot of people, I would argue it's actually lost on a lot of people. More people celebrate Black Friday, right? Or they celebrate Cyber Monday or anything like, more so than they're actually celebrating what Thanksgiving is actually meant to be.
Right.
Most of these holidays are commercial holidays. From a religious standpoint, if we can get in, there's obviously a lot of detail on how much, what would constitute a bid'ah, what wouldn't, etc., etc.
Right.
Are there any religious tuqus, which is religious rituals that are done on this holiday by anybody, by any group? Like, does anybody go to church? Does anybody go to a synagogue? Right.
So what you're doing is you're looking at Thanksgiving in the lens of how is it practiced today rather than its roots.
But what are its roots?
Well, let's say that they are religious. Does that invalidate it?
But are they? No. We're talking about something very specific. We're not talking about hypothetical. We're talking about something very practical.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Are the roots of Thanksgiving religious?
I'm pretty sure they're not.
They're not.
Yeah, they're just, Native Americans and whatnot.
Not even that. It's a story that's told to kind of unite the country.
Right.
The story isn't even real. That's why I'm saying it's Native American Heritage Day.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do, the whole Thanksgiving in the way that is taught usually in schools actually never happened.
I hear you.
It's meant to be a national kind of commemoration of being thankful for the ability to come to this new country, etc., etc. Mesh, that's fine. Does that make sense? So it has zero religious connotations. It's a national holiday. طيب, do scholars allow national holidays? For the most part, across the world, they allow them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a group of maybe some strict scholars who do not allow national holidays. But even then, they allow them with certain caveats. It can't be on the same day every year. You know what I mean? It has to be a toned-down celebration, meaning I'm not going to the level of Eid. We're not exchanging gifts. Does anybody exchange a Thanksgiving gift? Eid is typically gift-giving. Even in Christmas, people are giving gifts. Thanksgiving, there's no gift-giving, right? So it's not even from an American point of view, it's not a full-on celebration. It's a day of commemoration.
Right. And there's also, what I understand from the recent YQ lecture, well, not too recent, I think it was 2018. What he says is that there's a position that some scholars take is that when understanding whether or not a holiday is halal or haram, is that they look at the roots of it, and then some look at the understanding today. But if you take something by its roots, a lot of stuff becomes haram.
Sure.
You know, like if you look at something that, like for example, when the ladies they put henna on, historically that was like a Hindu Vedic practice, and so that would make it haram because historically by its roots it's haram. So it's the same reasoning they use for birthdays. The candles, oh, it's a pagan practice, so it's haram. Or the aqiqah itself, wasn't that I think a pagan practice, and then it became a Muslim practice, the aqiqah, when they slaughter on the day of the aqiqah. And then
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
But why? Because even though we say these have pagan practices, they actually probably originated in some monotheistic origin. So Hajj, if you look at purely academically, all Western academics would say, yeah, Hajj was a pagan ritual that was then co-opted by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we don't believe that. We believe that it started from Ibrahim alayhi salam through his son Ismail. Then later on it got paganized, and then we Islamicized it back again. So even though I see something being pagan, that doesn't mean that it always was pagan.
Right. Well, even then, like
You understand what I'm saying?
No, I hear you. But even then, right? Like, do we take something by how it's understood originally, by its roots, or by the waqi' today, by the understanding in the modern context? And I think that the understanding from Sheikh Hazaqadi was that based on a hadith that there was a man that used to slaughter at Bawana, and they made it haram to slaughter at Bawana, and then when he became Muslim, he asked if he could go back and slaughter a camel there because he has a camel he wanted to slaughter. He said, do you still have the jahiliyyah of Bawana in your heart? He said, no. He said, then go. And so that's like a core piece of evidence that it's dependent on how you understand something today rather than how it's understood historically.
Yeah. So, but you have to understand it holistically.
Yeah.
You can't divorce one from the other. They're taken together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is why I'm of the opinion I don't like birthdays, personally. Now, I'm not going to go to the level to say it's haram, it's bid'ah and stuff. You know what I mean? I'm not going to.
I hear you.
We'll do tabdi' of 80% of the ummah, unfortunately. But the thing is, the reality is, what's the origin of birthdays? Where do they come from? You know what I mean? Who first instituted them, and why were they instituted, and stuff like. And then how is it practiced today? I would argue the way that it's practiced today should lead a Muslim to not do it. What are we celebrating? If you want to celebrate a birthday, you should celebrate your mother who gave you birth on that day, not you as an individual. You didn't do anything. It's your mom who did all the work. So you should be going and kissing her feet and thanking her for all the good that she did for you, not celebrating you as a person, because you didn't accomplish anything. Like Umar, when he celebrated memorizing that surah, he's celebrating an accomplishment. This is something worthy of celebrating. But you just turned a year older. What is that celebrating, really? That's why there's a lot of older, even Americans, they don't like birthdays because they realize it's just, I'm now a year closer to death. I should be fearful for my end is near, I'm closer to death. What am I doing in my life? It should be introspection. The Prophet ﷺ, when he used to fast on Monday, when he was asked about it, he said, Hu yawma wulid. It's the day that I was born. So he's commemorating it very differently. He's fasting, he's worried about it. It's a cause for anxiety. It should be instead of celebrating. And so for kids, I understand you want to, encourage his people, etc. But yeah, that's something else.
I hear you. Let's go ahead and pause real quick for Sadat.
But and this is how it was in the smaller old building, where YQ was, because this building opened for us in Ramadan, this last Ramadan, but we're technically still, we haven't had our officially grand opening yet, because as you can see, like a lot of the stuff is still being done. Like the decorations here are not finished. There's still some stuff that needs to be done in the banquet hall. We still have stuff, so it's not a finished project per se.
I hear you.
So once we have the grand opening, YQ is already on slate to come and visit, because obviously
nice.
This is alhamdulillah, obviously all favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, but second, this is the building that YQ helped build.
Yeah.
Soliciting the donations, the vision for it, what we want to do. Memphis, Tennessee, if you think about it in terms of city size, it's not that big compared to some of these other cities. But this building that we're in right now is going to be the second largest Sunni masjid in America.
Wow.
Once it's finished. We have a 55-acre campus, a lot of programs. We're keeping it busy. We're trying, three imams, I think, is not enough.
Wow. MashaAllah.
In the sense that we have a lot of work that needs to be done. You know what I mean? In terms of the work, we have a full staff. I think we're understaffed in some ways. You know what I mean? We do need more. But at the end of the day, our resources as a Muslim community everywhere in the country are somewhat limited and tightened. So we're trying to get into a position where we have sustainable programs, we have sustainable, that sense of community, et cetera, et cetera. We're building it with 10, 15, 20, 30 years vision into the future. One program that we're trying to do, not program, a project, for example, senior home, Muslim seniors, a home for them, which sadly enough, we do need it. There's a need for it. There's a lot of seniors in our community. Their children moved out. They don't live in the same state. They need, just a communal place to live. And a lot of other, religions are doing this, faith groups, where it would be right next to the masjid. They can come walking, 5 daily prayers. We have stuff for them as well. We're not neglecting that segment. That's a future project that we need. Because a lot of times we think youth. And that's all great and good and dandy. But a lot of times it comes at the expense of a lot of these marginalized groups. And so we need to be holistic. And we are, inshallah ta'ala, trying to be holistic about, the vision. What do we want to do? So it's for total family life. You know what I mean? We have children, youth, young professionals, families, and our elders and seniors.
I hear you. And how long have you been Imam here so far?
I've been here for almost 2 years now.
Mashallah.
Yeah.
What were you doing before that?
I was an Imam as well at another masjid. I was in Nashville for a year.
Nice.
And then before that, I was here in Memphis for a few years. Before that, I was in Salt Lake City, Utah. Nice. For a few years.
So this is where you started then, Salt Lake City?
Salt Lake City.
Okay. And so were you always slated to become an Imam? Were you always shooting for becoming an Imam? What was your life like? Maybe say your early 20s. What was your life gearing towards?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was in college, obviously we were very active in our MSA, which was a lot of fun, and it kind of shaped us into, you know what I mean? I fell in love with MSA work, and so we kind of, after I graduated, I was working, IT here and there, technician, stuff like that. And
what did you study?
I studied film studies. Okay. At the U. But I went to LA for a summer to try to work, but it didn't work. You know what I mean? I didn't want to sell out my values and do something that, you know what I mean, I was going to regret. This isn't right. This doesn't align with what I want to do, Right. So I came back and I was kind of doing my own thing. We became more active in the masjid until one day the Imam in the masjid resigned abruptly. This is, a few years after graduating. But I've been helping at the masjid. I was part of the youth group. We were teaching Sunday school. We were doing summer camps for the kids. And then the community asked me, hey, can you be at least temporarily until we find somebody more, full-time? Because we know you have a job. I'm like, okay, sure. And then temporary turned into, okay, we'll just bring you on part-time. And then part-time became full-time. And then,
the rest is history.
Happened. The rest is history. And then you're doing this and you're like, oh man, And my journey for Islamic knowledge, was I had been doing it for myself, you know what I mean? Taking classes here, courses there, doing stuff, so alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. So were you, what kind of seeking of Islamic knowledge were you doing? Did you get a degree in something? Did you go to some sort of seminar? I mean, you're at Tiza now with me, and I think you're about to graduate. So what were you doing at this stage in your life in terms of seeking Islamic knowledge?
Yeah, so I mean, we had a thirst, alhamdulillah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow it to continue for knowledge. You know what I mean? It started at a very early age. Yeah. When my family moved to Gaza, I was 8 years old. My parents sold the house, the cars. My dad quit his job, moved to Gaza, and he started a business over there. And we went. My mother was teaching English. We enrolled in the schools, and initially I didn't know a lick of Arabic. And then, little by you learn. We enrolled in schools. We started in the tahfidh program, and alhamdulillah, we progressed from there. I was in third grade. By alhamdulillah, fourth grade, I was proficient in Arabic. We started, tajweed. By sixth grade, I was certified in, tajweed, ahkam al-tajweed and stuff like this. And we were memorizing. Alhamdulillah, we had family there. My grandfather, I think my grandfather in a lot of ways was my first teacher because he was an activist, in Gaza. He did a lot of stuff. He started, the tahfidh program there. He one of the founders, meaning from the 1970s, and in that same time, he's one of the founders of Lajnat Zakat Gaza, the Zakah Foundation, where they would collect Zakah and distribute, because there was nothing. You're under occupation, Israeli occupation. You have to do what you have to do. So they would do that. So he's a very active individual. He started that. But living with him, learning from him, and then alhamdulillah, I was blessed with him, my grandfather and my grandmother living with me when I was in college for a few years. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Benefiting from him and his knowledge, every day, seeing what he's doing. He would give nightly lectures at the masjid. This is even before I was an imam. Talks, so I'm translating for him. I'm asking him questions, we're verifying he's going through stuff. And then us, after this, I also traveled, overseas. I went to Kuwait for a little bit.
What'd you study in Kuwait?
Same thing, Islamic studies.
Okay.
So we came back, and then, alhamdulillah, I realized once I actually did become an imam, the community did approach me and they're like, hey, you need to get an official degree. We need to make all your knowledge official. So I did. I enrolled. GTF, I got, I finished my bachelor's in Islamic studies, and then I wanted to continue. I wanted something more rigorous. It wasn't as rigorous as I thought it would be. So I would sit down with YQ, and YQ was like, you can go overseas. I don't recommend it. If you wait a little bit, we're going to start TISA. And I'm like, what's TISA?
Oh, wow.
He's like, yeah, we're starting this, et cetera, et cetera. And this is at the cusp, like the year before he's about to leave. And I realized like he left Memphis primarily for TISA. Also other reasons, for his parents, because they're in Texas. And now they live with him, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
Which is a good thing. So he was like, yeah, we'll do TISA. TISA is a unique, kind of setup. It's something that's very American, but also very Islamic at the same time. We're not necessarily progressive. We're not, divorcing the tradition. We're rooted in the tradition, but it's something that's tailored for an American imam, an American student of knowledge, an American person who wants, because you can go overseas. There's not a lot of, things that are necessary for, we have a lot of graduates from universities overseas. When they come here, it's very difficult for them to put this together. So.
Right. The customs isn't taken to account. We can pause for Salat al-Dhuhr real quick and
we'll
jump back in, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.
Okay, so Sheikh Asghali left to East Plano, right? And he's at the Epic Masjid, East Plano Islamic Center. In terms of Memphis, though, how are things going here lately? Like as of recent events, how are things going in Memphis with MIC?
Oh, alhamdulillah. I mean, I think Memphis is great. You know what I mean? We have, the project MIC as you see it. Community is growing, alhamdulillah. We have a unique setup in the sense that we are a large small town, Memphis.
I hear you.
It's not a large city. We're not New York or Los Angeles, but at the same time, we're not a small town where we don't have the resources that we need. You can, what I mean. It is an established city. Muslim community is very old here, and I think it's very unique in the sense that number one, all of the masajid cooperate with each other, all of them without exception. In fact, during COVID, we had a united task force. We all met together. Nice. We took our decisions together. So like when, the lockdown, we closed it. We even closed before there was an official lockdown. 6 feet, all the different protocols, etc. We came together. We did them together. So alhamdulillah, masajid cooperate, which is a huge benefit. And this is one of the things that attracted me to come to Memphis, right? The fact that the masajid cooperate. They have a well-established Islamic school. A lot of the graduates get into top-tier universities. We have a good track record. You know what I mean? Islamic studies, we try to, emphasize it, etc. A city like Memphis, for it to attract somebody like, let's say, for example, YQ, Yasser Qadhi. For him to come here, it has to have something good, obviously. And he did. When he came, I don't know if I mentioned this before to you. YQ, when he first came to Memphis, and he's on record saying this, he only thought that he would be here for maybe 3-4 years. And ended up being here like almost 9-10 years he was here in Memphis, which is a huge, that's a big amount of time for him to settle down. He has roots here. His family still has roots here.
So he just liked the community. He liked the masjid. He liked the folks that were here. Everything,
the city, just the vibe, the environment, the fact that, because some masajid you'll have 500, 600 people coming to the masjid. That's great, but you can get lost.
Yeah.
There's no sense of community anymore. You know, in some ways, you know, you won't get to know the other brother. You know, I mean, there's a lot of strangers, and in too small of a community, there's not a lot going on. It's the same
Right.
5 brothers are doing everything. Whereas
Right.
I think we have a good, you know, size where things are happening. You know, and we do have a larger community.
How are the interfaith relations? I heard recently, I think Ahmad brought it up in class one time, that there was a masjid that they tried to establish outside of Memphis, and the city council blocked it.
in Mississippi.
Okay, so is it near?
I'm blaming it on Mississippi.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Because we're in Tennessee. No,
I hear you. So what happened like with that one? Like in terms of interfaith relations, is this particularly, you know, a racist area? Maybe is this?
No.
Okay.
No. We're first off, we're in the South,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're in the Bible Belt, and Memphis is the buckle of the belt, right?
Uh-huh.
So we're like dead center. Many churches did hesitate to work with many masajid. Across the street from us here at MIC, there's Heart Song. I don't know if you've seen the video. They've done a few documentaries about the relationship between Heart Song and MIC.
I haven't seen it.
I'll show it to you, inshallah ta'ala.
Sure.
And then you can post a link to it on your the thing. One was made by Starbucks because it was a unique story in the sense that a church came together with a mosque. This isn't a story that you hear all the time. Initially, when the church, because it's across the street, when they heard that there's a masjid opening up next door, they were furious. They were like, "What? We can't allow this to happen. Those guys are terrorists." That's literally what they thought. And the pastor, Steve Stone, amazing guy. I mean, I'm friends with him now. Stand-up guy. He's not like, you know, he knows there's differences between us, but he also knows that his Christian faith compels him to be a good neighbor, regardless, and to be tolerant and to be accommodating. And of course, as Muslims, we believe the same thing. So people in his congregation actually fought him. Why are you guys being nice to the Muslims? They didn't know anybody from the Muslims, so they put up a sign: Heart Song Church welcomes the Memphis Islamic Center.
Wow.
And then that's how the relationship began. And now we have a 20-acre plot of land right here between MIC and Heart Song that's designated as the Friendship Park.
Wow.
And it's actually already, you know, they bought the land, they're gonna, you know, create it and all these other things. It's in the works.
MashaAllah.
To kind of symbolize that friendship. Now, they got a lot of flack. They, as Christians, got a lot of flack from other Christians for why are you guys being cozy with the Muslims? And even them, it took, you know, I don't want to say it took them a while, but they have to open up to these ideas. There are churches, so now, alhamdulillah, because of the inroads that we've made with like Heart Song, for example, because I'm in charge of Dawah and Outreach, next Sunday, I'm going to a church, to their adult Sunday school, and to talk to them about Islam. And I have another church that I'm going to talk to, and we're going around. Initially, some of the people at the church are like, wait a second, who's coming? An imam coming to the church? Why is this, you know? There's a lot of ignorance. And some people are very simply intolerant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll blame some of it on ignorance. Some of it is Islamophobia. Some of it is hatred. So that masjid, to answer your question, that masjid down in Mississippi, it's the city council that actually blocked it.
Right.
Initially, they were like, a mosque here. Well, and you open and you look at the Facebook comments; they were terrible. It was, you know, there's just ignorance across the board.
Well, it's partly understandable, right? Because if you're a faithful Christian and you're getting your news from Fox News, and Fox News is telling you that the Muslims, you know, they're here to do some damage. You know, they're here to uproot your faith as Christians. They're here to implement Sharia law and, you know, overthrow the White House and take over. And they're here, they're trying to make inroads into your community to take over. They want to do you harm. And if they actually believe that, then it's understandable that that person is going to be next door. Of course they'd be scared. So what do you think is the solution to these folks that sit on city council that are blocking masajid from being established, that are, you know, it's probably not a great place to be when you're looking to be Muslim in the South, in a very, you know, particularly rural area, and people really don't like you, they're not familiar with you. What do you think the solution is for that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, alhamdulillah, we didn't have that problem here in Tennessee. You know, Memphis, the city, obviously. In fact, Memphis City is the first city in America to have a recognized Muslim month. So the month of March is Muslim month in Memphis. So the city gives us access to a lot of resources to promote Islam and Muslims. This happened after 9/11. No other city has this that I'm aware of. Because, you know, they have like, you know, this month, you know, African American Heritage Month, whatever, you know, this month, that month. We have Muslim month. in Memphis. So they've been very accommodating. No, but that's because Memphis is an established city. Cities tend to be more educated, more tolerant, more open-minded. As soon as you get into the rural areas and the outskirts and stuff, and we go down to Mississippi, because Memphis is right on the border with Mississippi.
Yeah.
You tend to have that. Now, here's the thing. The problem is, I'll add this. I don't blame it all on ignorance. If a person is just getting whatever they get from Fox News, and they believe the things that they're hearing there, like what you just said, it sounds completely absurd. If you said that about any group, I'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. There's what is this? People are too gullible. If they believe that, most people, I think, want an excuse to not deal with an other. An other represents an unknown, and they don't like uncertainty in their lives.
For sure, exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's a lazy response. If they just thought about it for 2 seconds, whatever they're being fed, 2 seconds, they would realize, wait a second, that's absurd. But they don't. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who actually encourages us in the Quran to do that. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَعِظُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ وَفُرَادَ مَثْنَى وَفُرَادَ وَتَتَفَكَّرُوا مَا بِصَاحِبِكُم مِّن جِنَّةٍ. You know, say, indeed, I only remind you, I'm just asking you to do one thing. For you to stand, you know, solitary or in groups of two. And to think, most people won't even think momentarily. مَا بِصَاحِبِكُم مِّن جِنَّةٍ. Your friend, your companion, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, he's not crazy.
Yeah.
He's not. If you just think about it for just a second, just a moment, most people aren't willing to even think, just to ponder, wait a second, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make any sense, what the person is saying. Most people just blindly follow whatever they want to follow.
Yeah. And it's getting worse. Like statistics show that, you know, more and more people have a negative view. The majority of Americans, I think it's 53%, have a negative view towards Islam and Muslims. And, you know, Donald Trump didn't help. You know, it's gotten worse since 9/11. It hasn't gotten better. You know, with more distance between, 9/11 and now, it's gotten actually worse for Muslims in America. So the situation is actually deteriorating for us. That's what the statistics show, that people actually have more and more people have a negative view. Americans have a negative view towards Islam and Muslims. So I think that there are a lot of concerns, not only with us being, you know, different, but there's a concern about the running for office part, you know, that Muslims are now for the first time in office, and they're not big fans of the two Muslim congresswomen, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. First of all, what's your perspective on Muslims in office? If this is something we want to go into, I don't know.
Yeah, no. I was gonna talk about like the whole perception of Islam and Muslims. Is it getting worse for Muslims in America? I don't think that's the case.
Why is that?
I don't think that's the case. I think things have gotten better. I mean, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, things were terrible. People were being harassed by the government. They were harassed by, I mean, the harassment is still kind of happening, but I'm saying, like, you know what I mean? I think it was much worse. I think Muslims now are being more and more accepted. It's not as bad as, I'm not saying that it's good right now. Obviously, we have a lot of there's a lot that needs to be done for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as bad as it was in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. I also want to say, like, the statistics also show interesting things, that if the person knows one Muslim, right, just as a friend or an acquaintance or a coworker, their image of Islam completely changes.
Oh, for sure.
The overwhelming majority of people that have a positive view of Islam, it's because they know a Muslim. And so one of the things that we were trying to do was to get people to go out there and be what this means. I mean, the onus, always, yani, if there's something that I can do, I need to be doing it. And so if what will fix the situation is by me being a proud Muslim, you know what I mean, I'm out there, my coworkers know who I am, my neighbors know who I am, etc. That's going to change perspectives big time. You know what I mean? We can talk about all these different ways that we want people to be more tolerant, but at the end of the day, people are people. And if I know a person who is of this out group, if I identify with an in group and then there's an out group over here, and if I know a person from the out group and I'm like, wait a second, I'm seeing on the news that all these Muslims are terrorists, at least that's the claim, but I have Muhammad here that I work with, and he's such a good guy. Like, he's a stand-up guy. He's one of the best employees that we have in our company, and he's like this and this and this. Then that'll cause me to kind of doubt what I'm seeing, and I realize, wait a second, what I'm being told is not correct. But if Muhammad changes his name to Mo and never talks about Islam, he doesn't even identify as a Muslim, right?
Right.
I'm not going to have that positive image of Islam. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes we think that what I do to help me personally, by just kind of blending in and being under the radar, I think that it's helping me, but actually in the long term, it's not. It's not neither helping me nor is it helping my community.
Yeah. So what would you say is the goal of Muslims in America? I think someone asked this question to Sheikh Yasir Qadi in a recent lecture. I think he was doing it at in the university that opened in Pakistan. He said it preservation and propagation, like terms of preserving your faith and then just sharing your faith. And he also said one of the best ways to share your faith is to just be an upstanding citizen, and then also be Muslim. Like, you don't have to go door to door, Jehovah's Witness type, sharing Islam, but just to be an upstanding citizen and to also keep your faith. So what in your mind is the best way, or the goal, really?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard his talk. I haven't heard that talk, but I think, you know, the points are very valid. You know what I mean? We need to preserve the faith, and honestly, some of us are doing a better job than others in preserving the faith of ourselves and our you know, children and everybody else. Propagation, same thing. There is an onus of da'wah, and da'wah, and we, like you said, it's not just going door to door and talking to people, or apologetics, or refutations, or, you know what I mean, responses, or YouTube, you know, whatever, or Twitter. This is you being an upstanding citizen, you being a good Muslim, etc., but also not being afraid of identifying. You know, the verse that you know, that in Surah Fussilat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah? So he's calling to Allah, and he does righteous deeds. So he's backing it up with actions. So he's not just giving da'wah, but his actions are also giving da'wah. وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. But then the last one, I think, is the least understood. وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And he said, I am a Muslim. Part of your da'wah is merely identifying as whatever it is that you want people to understand. You being a good Muslim is actually a form of da'wah, according to this verse. So this is not something that he's just saying out of nowhere. There's a backing for it. And a lot of people diminish this. You know how many, I mean, I'm sure you know this. Most Muslim students in a public high school do not identify as a Muslim, meaning they're not public with the fact that they're Muslim, or that they're any different, or they'll go by a nickname, or they'll do whatever. And it's tough because they're like a lone fish in a huge ocean full of sharks, and they don't want to, you know what I mean, be different or stand out, and that pressure on them and stuff like this. But as you grow older, as you grow up, you have to. There's that one point you have to embrace who it is you are. That question of identity, who I am. I shouldn't be afraid of it. I shouldn't be afraid of judgment. I shouldn't. And having our parents and our Islamic communities, you know, like our masajid, instill in us a sense of pride to our identity. Like, don't be afraid to say that you're Muslim. It's not a problem. You can be Muslim and American. Unfortunately, because of the way that I think, as parents understand it, it gets passed on to the kids unintentionally, which is that being fully American and being fully Muslim are at odds. When in fact, they're not at odds. You know, and a person, well, no, there's American things that are antithetical to Islam. Like what? Like drinking? Who said that drinking is an American institution? Yeah. Who said that going to a club is an American institution? It's not. Yeah. That's not what defines America. Right. You know, what defines America is very different. If you read the Constitution, there's nothing in there. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the ideals of liberty that define America. It's live and let live. That's what's enshrined in the Constitution.
So why is that antithetical?
Well, I didn't say it was.
No, but I'm saying, like, a lot of these parents are thinking, like, oh, I have to, if you know, oh, you're so Americanized. I'm like, what does that even mean, dude? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so it seems like your approach is to take things public, to be open and honest about who you are, to identify as Muslim in the public sphere. A question, though, for you, and if this is something we want to discuss. Part of that, though, is to take a stand on political issues. Like right now in the media, something big that's happening right now is that Roe v. Wade is possibly going to be overturned because the number of justices in the Supreme Court, it's been taken up to the Supreme Court, the case, and the number of justices are now mostly conservative, and so people are of the opinion that Roe v. Wade, which gives women the right to abortion, could possibly be overturned. And the clergy, with all due respect, haven't spoken on this. Muslims have taken it upon, Muslims in the activist area have taken it upon themselves to side with
the liberal position, which is we should be fighting to keep Roe v. Wade. What do you think from an Islamic paradigm should be the stance of Muslims in America?
So I have a very unpopular opinion.
I hear you.
Right?
I'm for it. Go ahead.
We're not talking about the root issue. Why is abortion even an issue?
What do you mean?
Yeah, see, that's my unpopular opinion.
Uh-huh.
Most people are confused as you are when I bring this up. Like, why is abortion even an issue?
I don't understand. So are you saying, why are we having a discussion about it in government?
Why is it an issue? Why is abortion such a big issue? Why wasn't it historically an issue?
Well, I think for the first time when Roe v. Wade was passed, there's legislation that guarantees the right to abortion, like if a woman wants to do it.
Yeah, I understand. But what I'm saying is, why is abortion now an issue?
Well, people are not as religious. They don't care. They don't believe in the sanctity of that as a thing, I think.
Okay. So it's because of promiscuity.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and 95, what is it? I think I read this statistic. I think it's well over 95% of all abortions are by women who are not married.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Meaning they're having children out of wedlock. Like, having children out of wedlock, is this an Islamic stance?
No.
It's not. Is it a Christian stance?
Of course not.
Are Christians talking about it? Having children out of wedlock, or even a relationship out of wedlock. Just to be frank, we're talking about our Islamic principles.
I'm sure they are.
I'm not trying to be I'm
yeah.
not trying to be, you know what I mean, difficult or anything like
No,
this.
I hear you. Yeah, I'm sure at some level they are not as much.
They've given up on that battle.
Yeah.
They're not even talking about it. Right now in church, they'll give you dating advice. When aslan, is dating allowed within Christendom?
What's that word you use there? What's that?
To begin with.
Okay.
Aslan.
I'm just translating for the audience.
Yeah. To begin with, by default, is that allowed for you to have a relationship with a woman without being married to her? Is that allowed in a Christian?
Right. It's not.
It's not allowed. But they've given up on that idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If we were in an ideal situation where people would only have relationships with people that they intended to marry, because I think marriage is a beautiful thing. I think we've destroyed marriage by opening up these floodgates. People say, oh, I have a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's marriage under a different name, because they expect them to be exclusive without actually committing. It's a fear of commitment. We're destroying relationships. People experience heartbreak multiple times in their life. They can't settle down. When they want to settle down, they're like antsy, they're anxious, they don't know how to settle down. It's a mess, right? And it initially stems from people not wanting to commit. That fear of commitment and the fear of marriage and the fear of all these things. They don't want to make it official. I want to be able to wake up one day and just text her and be like, Ma'as-salam, I don't want you anymore. I don't feel like you. I want to move on to somebody else or something new. Right?
Yeah.
So with all of that said, since the vast majority, 95% or whatever it was, of all abortions are by women who are not in, either not in a committed relationship, or obviously all of them are unmarried, right? If we solve that problem, would we have a problem with abortion? Abortion would be nothing. It wouldn't even be that big of a deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's because we've destroyed, and when I say we've destroyed, I don't think it was necessarily intentional. Like, I'm not trying to stir up, there's a conspiracy against whatever. It's just the way things have gone, and we've unfortunately kind of stayed in those steps of shaitan, destroying the very foundation of making up society, which is a family unit. We have very few families left anymore. You know what I mean? This is for the first time, I think, in American history that more children are born out of wedlock than in wedlock. Meaning they don't have an established family. Imagine those are kids that are going to grow up without knowing their dads, or even some of them not even knowing their mothers, not even knowing, not having an extended family to turn to. When they say it takes a village to raise kids, I know this. People who are families, you know why parents are so stressed out these days? Because they have no extended family to help out with the kids. Traditionally, historically, we had extended families, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. All of these people were pitching in to raise those kids together. It is so tough to raise a kid. Just one child, to raise him. Imagine raising him by yourself, let alone with two parents. Two parents struggle, right? Because it's almost impossible. Historically, this never happened. Historically, in the human race, we never had that where it was just two parents raising a kid. It was always the entire village. And now we're not even having two parents. It's one parent. Wallah, I can't imagine. Wallah, the sisters that are out there, or some of the fathers that are out there that are raising a kid on their own, may Allah bless them, may Allah help them and protect them. It's tough. And I'm not saying it's their fault. This is just the society that we're born into. If we can help the situation, we should. And this is why I think communities have a responsibility to help these types of things, right? So going back, abortion is just one of the consequences of the decay at the core, which is we're not actually emphasizing good families. If we take care, if people actually committed to a relationship, they don't have abortions. Typically they don't. And even in those cases, they have them under medical circumstances. And aslan shar'i, from a sharia point of view, that's allowed. If there's a medical necessity, if there's an emergency, something's going to happen, you can go ahead. This is why the Islamic stance on this is very nuanced. But what I'm saying, we wouldn't even be having this discussion if there was an emphasis on building a family, not being promiscuous before marriage. Many people, they can't wait to marriage. Like, marriage is so difficult these days. And even as a Muslim community, we've made marriage so hard. The halal is so hard and the haram is so easy. It's so easy these days. You want to do anything haram, you can do it.
Right.
So easily. You want to do something halal, it's going to take you a long time.
Yeah. So just for clarity, because that's another fun topic, but just for clarity on abortion, the Islamic position is that you said it's allowed under medical necessity. What does that entail?
I mean, there's resources. I don't want to get into, you know what I mean? Like the technical, details of what does it entail? Because that's a medical discussion.
Are you saying harm to the mother?
Harm to the mother, yeah.
Okay. But the normal position is that it's not allowed.
No.
No as in yes? Or no as in?
No, I mean, it's not allowed. It's not allowed,
okay.
Unless there are certain circumstances.
I hear you.
Does that make sense? Yaqeen, Yaqeen Institute had a very good article about it, infographic. People can check that out.
Okay. YAQEEN, just for clarity.
Yeah, YAQEEN, Yaqeen Institute. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So when something like this is being debated, like this is center stage all over the nation right now, this is what's being talked about. Should Muslims just stay quiet? Just sit to the sidelines and let you guys duke it out? Like, what should we do in this situation when we're talking about politics and things that will be enforced and enshrined in law?
So, just because people are talking about something doesn't mean that we need to be talking about the same thing. I'm a believer, I'm a fan of Muhammad Ali, the boxer. May Allah have mercy upon him.
Ameen.
He was a person who always set the agenda. People would come, they're like, hey, I want to talk about this. And he's like, no, I'm going to talk about this. He has his agenda. He knows what he's going to talk about. We as Muslims, we don't have to get caught up in discussions. Now, I'm not saying that it's irrelevant to us. It is actually, it is very well relevant. But we should go to people who know what they're talking about, experts. I'm not an expert in abortion or in women's rights. Or in what would be, the consequences of siding with one side or the other. I know that almost every issue is very nuanced, and there needs to be a discussion on this. And like I said, I gave you my perspective on the whole thing. I think we're missing the point. This whole discussion would not even be a discussion if we actually went back to our original roots, as Muslims and Christians and Jews, not just, Like, I'm not talking just about Muslims. But the whole idea of not emphasizing the family has caused us to get into this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I'm wondering if we should be interested in trying to affect change at the political level.
If you believe it, if it's a worthy cause, you believe that it's a worthy cause. I can't tell you what is a worthy cause. People have different inclinations to different causes because of their personality, and that's great. We actually need that diversity in thought. So we shouldn't just look up to one sheikh or another sheikh to see what's important to talk about and what's not. Because you might have an inclination. Imam Malik was approached by a guy about this, where the guy told Imam Malik, he's like, why aren't you participating in the jihad with us? You're not fighting, you're not doing, you're just hadith knowledge. He said, Jazakallah khair. Imam Malik wrote him back a letter. He said, by Allah, Allah has قسم الأعمال كما قسم الأرزاق. He has distributed our a'mal, our deeds, just as he distributed wealth, meaning some people are wealthy, some people are poor. And the different deeds that we find ourselves naturally inclined to are also distributed, meaning ربما فتح لفلان في الصلاة ما لم يفتح لغيره. Some person, salah, as a deed, he's able to perfect it and he loves it in a way that other person might not have. وَرُبَّمَا فُتِحَ لِفُلَانٍ فِي الصَّوْمِ مَا لَمْ يُفْتَحْ لِغَيْرِهِ. And some person might excel in fasting. He loves to fast. He fasts all the time. That's really, something that he excels in. وَرُبَّمَا فُتِحَ لَهُ فِي الْجِهَادِ مَا لَمْ يُفْتَحْ لِغَيْرِهِ وَرُبَّمَا فُتِحَ لَهُ فِي الْعِلْمِ مَا لَمْ يُفْتَحْ لِغَيْرِهِ. So he says, he names these categories just as examples, but it could be in anything. And he says, this is why, he says, فَلَا أَظُنُّ أَنَّ مَا أَنَا فِيهِ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ أَفْضَلْ مِمَّا أَنْتَ فِيهِ. I do not believe that what I am in is better than what you are in. I just believe that people have different inclinations, different areas in which they excel. That's very good. So if somebody's an activist and they believe genuinely, they believe and they have proof that if I champion this side over that side, is something that I should be doing, ahlan wa sahlan, go ahead, do it. I'm not going to stop you. As long as you're still within your Islamic principles, you're still doing, what's necessary, etc. But this is why you'll have Muslims that are inclined towards activism in certain areas over others. And this is why you'll also have Muslim scholars that are experts in some areas over others. A lot of times we go to the sheikh and we expect him to be an expert in everything. Sheikh, right. Which one, what should I do? I don't know. This is not my area of expertise.
Right. So the reason, what I'm trying to get at is the fact that there are Muslim activists that are, proponents of certain, things at the political level. What I was thinking is that Muslim clergy would be their coaches and referees to help guide them towards what they're supposed to be doing that is permissible and not permissible. Like you mentioned that they should be following Islamic principles. Shouldn't there be a guide to show them what those principles are? Because a lot of things are being thrown out there. I'm not going to mention names. I don't want to start any, fitna or whatever. But, there are some people that will say, well, my God is a she. Well, that's like, whoa. Like no one has ever said that in the Islamic scholarship tradition, at all. So maybe some hand-holding is needed. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I can say whatever I want to. It doesn't mean that they're going to listen.
Right, but legitimacy comes from the clergy in Islam. That's kind of where we look towards as guides.
Sure, and I'm sure. I mean, I don't know to the specifics of specific individuals. I'm sure they have clergy that they refer to. I'm sure they have people that talk to them, and they talk to people. I know this for a fact. You know what I mean? Like they've probably consult with people. People have reached out to them. You know what I mean? Behind doors. We don't see it publicly. That's not a problem. People should do this. At-tanasuh. Sharing good advice is something that's needed. So if somebody can advise them, it doesn't have to be public. And a lot of times it might be actually in private. Then that's actually a very good thing.
Okay.
So utilizing these back channels a lot of times is better than creating a scene in which there might be more backlash than is needed. However, at the same time, like you said, we do have resources that we go to. In these modern issues, Islam, like a lot of times I'll have a student who asks, hey, what does Islam say about 1, 2, and 3? I'm like, who's this Islam? What's his last name? Who are we talking about? He's like, no, I'm talking about the religion. I'm like, no, the religion doesn't say anything. It's the scholars who interpret our, the raw sources that we have.
Right.
But that's why you'll have multiple opinions on many issues. It's only on a few. Obviously we have things in which most, if not all, Muslim scholars agree. But in a lot of these issues, it's only an issue because there is a disagreement on the interpretation. And so she might be, or he might be, going to a Muslim scholar who's legitimizing what they're saying. We don't know that. You know what I mean? So if I differ, it's not necessarily that I differ with the activist. It also could be that I differ aslan with the scholar who's actually holding that opinion as well. And there are scholars who hold really, far out their opinions that I might not agree with, but that doesn't delegitimize them necessarily in their scholarship. That's why in Islam it is a scholarship. We can refute, we can respond, we can have a debate, we can have a friendly conversation, all these things. I prefer my methodology. I prefer having a friendly conversation. I used to give khutbahs back when I was in Salt Lake City. You know what I mean? And I remember when I first started as the Imam, this brother would send me emails after every khutbah. You should repent from this methodology. This is what you're saying is, ikhwani, ikhwan muslimin, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, brother, jazakallah khair. I said, first off, I'm not a member of the Ikhwan Muslimin. I was never a member of the Ikhwan Muslimin.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're getting this from, but I would like to discuss it more with you over a cup of tea. Would you mind coming over to my house? You know what I mean? We can discuss this. I knew the brother, you know what I mean? He's a nice guy. He's just concerned. I understand his concern. He'd email me, no, there's no need. You should just repent. Here's the pages, Gaza, whatever. I'm like, brother, I want to understand where this is coming from. I haven't said anything. And if you want, I can come to your house. Or if you want, we can even meet at a third place. لا. Nothing. طيب. Few weeks later, I get the same email. Brother, you know, this Ikhwani methodology. I'm like, what Ikhwani methodology? I didn't say literally nothing. Yani, I'm like, what is it exactly? He's just saying the methodology. Yakhi. So I emailed him again. Yani, I was like, look, you have to come and meet with me. You can't just throw out these accusations. I want to see where this is. But I'm not going to hide. I don't want you to hide behind your keyboard. You know?
Right.
This is something that and what I'm telling you, this story happened 15 years ago. That's why it's over email, right? Nowadays, it would have been over Twitter or something.
Or YouTube. They'll make a YouTube video refuting you.
Whatever
refutation of.
But it's not even refutation. He's conjuring things up from nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm not against the Ikhwan or for the Ikhwan. This has nothing to do with them, you know, as a group. I'm just saying in general. Where are you getting this from? So I told him, brother, Jazakallah khair, give me specifics. But I want to sit down with you and talk to you, have a conversation. Most people do not want to have a conversation. Why?
Right.
Why is he afraid of the conversation? Because he might be proven wrong. He might have realized, wait, I conjured this from my own imagination. Or I want to find fault in you. Why do you want to find fault in me, akhi? And there are people, unfortunately, I'm not saying about this brother, Allahu A'lam, his intention. But there are people who their whole goal is for some reason to find fault in every. And a person uploads a lecture, he's not listening to benefit. He's listening to refute. He's listening to find fault. Where are the faults in this person? Yahi, why? Why are you doing this? If your intention is to correct the faults, email him directly. Yahi, message him, talk to him. But we've made it a business to do this refutation and do all these things. And this is why there are people who do work within the back channels if they hear something wrong, etc., etc. And I believe that this is one of the best ways. Because if you're sincere and they're sincere, they'll accept it. I've yet to find somebody who'll be like, oh, what you're saying. If they get defensive, I understand. They might identify it. You know, they might have taken it part of their identity, who they are. But generally speaking, I think we've lost the art of giving good advice. Aslan, it's part of our religion. We need to learn this. We need to learn how to actually talk to people, approach them. Hey, you know, this, I don't agree with this. You know what I mean? And here's why. And I just want something good for you. It's in private. It's whatever. And if they tell you, hey, I want to discuss it over a cup of coffee, go. Don't be afraid. You might have made assumptions that weren't there. Wallahi, almost every time I made an assumption. And when I was wrong, I realized, man, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you tend to try to refute this and debunk this, and then it turns out you misunderstood the whole thing. You know what I mean? And then it's a humbling experience, and then you learn not to make those assumptions to begin with. So
I hear you.
We have to do that. I think the same thing, with a lot of especially public discourse. Unfortunately, a lot of the public discourse is terrible. And people go straight to a person's intentions. They go straight to where they're coming from, and we don't know that.
Right, and I think the issue is that the person in the public eye is the one that is seen as the source of truth in terms of Islam. So the non-Muslims, when they look to understand a position of somebody on something, Muslims on something, they look at the person that's in the public. And, not only on in terms of the congresswoman, but also a recent example is when some, fringe understanding was brought to the forefront when a person came out and said that saying Merry Christmas is worse than murder. Something absolutely ridiculous that he brought from a book that Ibn al-Qayyim wrote. First of all, he doesn't even mention the fact that this is something that is part of ijtihad. So saying, and you can, if you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but saying something is halal or haram on ijtihad, which is forming your own opinion, which doesn't have a direct explicit evidence from the text, can't be one of those, because halal bayn, haram is bayn. So if the Quran says that the halal is clear and the haram is clear, but there's multiple opinions on it, well, clearly it's not clear. So it can't be halal or haram. It's something in between, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay, go ahead.
And this issue of what because وَبَيْنَهُمْ أَمْرٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ. But it doesn't mean it's mushtabihat for somebody, but it's clear for someone else.
Right, but
does that make sense?
Yes, but there's multiple opinions on something. How can it be?
No, but in saying, hold on.
Yeah.
In this issue of saying Merry Christmas, are there multiple opinions?
Yes. I'm pretty sure.
In terms of what? That it's permissible or impermissible?
Yes.
Or is it at how impermissible is it?
That's a good question.
You understand what I'm saying? Because I don't think there's any reputable Muslim scholar who says it's permissible blanketly to say Merry Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so this is where I'm getting this from. There's an understanding that there's multiple positions on it, makruh, mubah, is it disliked, not disliked, whatnot. That comes from the Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya about this position where he collects from different people, like Imam al-Shatibi on this and Imam Ahmed. But what I'm trying to get at here is that a person comes out and says that this is worse than murder, and then in the public eye, some Muslims they'd rather not be in the public. I understand, but the people that are in the public are the folks that YQ refers to as the neophytes. The people that are new in their they're my age, and then they're out uploading videos to YouTube about halal and haram, which is very strange because and they're using something that is absolutely minority opinion. Like one person has this opinion that it's worse than murder. No one else has said that ever, and they put it and they apply it as a standard across the board. They go, guys, this is what Islam says, and then the people that want to make us look bad, right-wing extremists, pick up on that and they publicize it, and then we're being affected negatively and whatnot. So what I'm asking is how to combat that, and how to stop that, how to stop the attacks.
We need better representatives of Islam.
Okay, for sure, exactly. And so what I'm asking is
that young YouTuber who's uploading something like that. We need to highlight the fact that he's a nobody,
right.
Or he doesn't speak on behalf of Islam. So who speaks on behalf of Muslims?
The clergy, right?
Sure. What do the clergy say? And that's what we go to. And we have to highlight that. I think a lot of times with people, we have to highlight that. Like, this guy's a nobody. He can say whatever he wants. It doesn't mean that it's correct or even true.
Yes.
Aslan, to begin with. I'm using this word again, right? To begin with, right? The default is there anybody who speaks on behalf of Islam?
There isn't, which is why it's a collection, right? It's a group of people that understand Islam. Ulama warathatul anbiya, the scholars, the inheritors of the prophets.
So the more knowledge you have, the more scholarly you are, the more reputation you have, the more whatever.
Yeah.
And so we highlight that very clearly with this guy.
But today Muslims in America don't look towards the shuyukh and the imams for.
So that's a problem we have to resolve.
And that this is one of the reasons why I'm coming to you and asking you directly about Roe v. Wade, to bring the clergy back to the public sphere, rather than the Muslim activists or the Muslim politicians that are telling everyone, we represent Islam, this is what Islam says.
Sure. But that's already been done. It's not just me. You know what I mean? Like, there's people that have spoken about this. They're very clear. Like I said, there's scholarly work that's been done by people much more qualified than I. You know what I mean? With the issue of, Merry Christmas being an issue, how severe is it? Where is Ibn al-Qayyim coming from? I love Ibn al-Qayyim, you know what I mean? But why would he say something like this? If you go back and read his book, you'll see exactly why he says, whatever he says. Does that apply to 2021 in America?
Exactly.
It doesn't. You know what I mean? He's in a completely different context, etc. Now, does that mean that it's permissible for a Muslim? Aslan, this is such a tertiary issue. It's such a side issue that I think we get lost in these debates and we lose focus on the bigger issue that we face as a Muslim ummah, especially living in the West. You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with whether you say Merry Christmas or not. Wallahi, it doesn't. It's just a small issue. What's bigger is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your kids' relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your future, your iman. Are you able to preserve your iman? Okay. What do you think is going to happen 30 years from now? What are the masajid going to look like? MIC right now is very beautiful and very nice and it's brand new. 30 years from now, how is it going to look? What are the people after us going to be doing? Are we even going to have children? Yeah, think about this. Many of the same people that fight for, to be on the board of a masjid or to be a leader, what are their own kids doing? Are their kids even going to be interested in the masjid or even be going? Wallah, I'm fearful. I'm so fearful for, our community, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that we don't go the route of many other communities around the world, that we're living in predominantly non-Muslim lands, meaning non-Muslim by, there's not a lot of Muslims around them. And what happens to them? You know what I mean? Yes, they built masajid. This happened in South America. They built masajid. And then what happened to the masajid? Almost virtually none of them are left. Even from, the book that you guys are reading in the Islamic America class, where he talks about that second wave of Muslim immigration, between the 1880s and up until the 1920s. For those 40 years, people were coming. And some masajid were built. Is there a single one left? Not a single one is left. One of the scariest statistics that happened was that every single one of those men who married a Christian or a non-Muslim woman, right? How many of their children retain the faith? How many of their grandchildren retain the faith? You know what the percentage is? It's 0.
Wow.
They did research. They tried to track down. They literally tracked down thousands of people. Most of them had no clue that they had a Muslim ancestor. The ones who did assumed that, oh yeah, I have a Muslim ancestor, the same way that they would assume that they have an Irish ancestor, meaning it's an ethnicity, not a faith. They're like, yeah, I think we have a great grandfather who was Muslim. And he just says it, he doesn't even know what being Muslim means. He just thinks that, yeah, it's some exotic, thing out there, not knowing that it's actually a part of the faith. You have people, there are descendants of this, walking among us, where they had a forefather who was Muslim, and then the faith was completely lost. That's what I'm worried about. Now, his faith was lost, not because he was saying Merry Christmas. It's because they were actually celebrating Christmas. They went full out, and they ignored the Eid. They didn't even know when Ramadan was. They weren't praying 5 times a day.
Yeah.
So, of course, this is going to happen. You know what I mean? So we have to instill in our children a sense of identity, a sense of Islam, being proud of it, you know what I mean, understanding what it means. And if you feel that you're not qualified as a parent, the masjid is here. Bring them to the masjid. I've talked to parents, like, oh, my daughter went to college, she took her hijab off. Okay, why did she take it off? She doesn't believe in it. But I thought she always believed in it. I'm like, did you ever talk to her about hijab? No, I just told her she has to start wearing it when she was like 13. So the girl was forced. At 13, she's not going to stand up to her mom. But as soon as she went out on college, she's living in the dorm by herself, she took it off. And she's not even practicing any Islam. She has a boyfriend and everything. Like completely, khalas, divorced from the religion. Completely.
Wow.
And so I asked the lady, this is just an example. I asked the lady, why didn't you bring her to the masjid? Oh, I was always busy. And there weren't that many programs in the masjid, I'm like, but you can bring her. If you can't teach, bring them to somebody who can. There's resources out there. Just go and look for them. Of course, that girl, khalas, she's gone. You talk to her. I've talked to and it's like, what the heck? You're starting from the bare basics. There's not even a belief in God, barely, and it's a disaster. And a lot of these parents are thinking that they want to raise their kids the same way that they were raised, where nobody sat them down to talk to them. Nobody cared about them. Nobody showed them love. You know what I mean? Because they were raised in that village back home, where it did take a village to raise them. But now when they come to America, there is no village. You have to create your own. So we can either create it together in a nice community, in a masjid, putting our kids in a school, having friends and stuff like that are Muslim, making sure they're in that, good environment, raising them properly. But also they understand, hey, there's a bigger world out there where there are a lot of people that are not Muslim. You know what I mean? My kids, you ask them, like, oh, these Christians, my daughter's like, Baba, all these Christians, like, why don't they know about Islam? Like, well, it's because we need to tell them. You know what I mean? Like, don't they know, God doesn't have a son? Don't they know that Jesus is not, they're concerned. You can tell the worry. But it's because we've instilled in them these issues. They know what separates them from the other, and they know why Islam makes sense. They know why Islam is logical. They know why people are converting to Islam and not the other way around, typically speaking. And it's the people that are leaving, it's the people that didn't even know what they had to begin with. The people that are leaving Islam, quote unquote, these young people, they didn't even know what they had to begin with, many of them. Or many of them just want an excuse to live the promiscuous life that they thought that they were yearning for. Or in fact, they'll realize very soon thereafter, like, wait a second, this isn't all that it was hyped up to be. I'm not happy. Because they're looking for happiness, ultimately. And then they find out that happiness that they were chasing is fleeting, it's temporary, and it leaves them with more regret than aslan, and it weighs heavier on their heart than aslan the happiness that they had from the get-go. And eventually they'll find their way back if they had those good roots. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope that everyone who is lost does come back to their roots and does come back to Islam.
I mean, so priority number one for you is very much preserving the faith tradition.
Yeah.
And especially as Muslims.
It's like YQ said, preservation and propagation. And I think it starts with preservation.
I hear you. So you don't seem like the typical sheikh, if I may say. The reason why is because I see that you're wearing a suit. You're not wearing the thobe and the cap on your head. Is there a reason for this?
I like my hair.
Okay.
No. What is a sheikh? So I remember when I first came to Memphis, I was at the other masjid, and I was giving the khutbah, and like 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, a bunch of brothers come up to me like, Sheikh, why don't you wear sheikh clothes? I'm like, so what is that? What is a sheikh clothes? I'm asking him. I want to hear it from him. I know what he's asking, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to get it out of him. for him to refute himself.
Okay.
What are sheikh clothes?
Right.
It's like, thobe, dish dasha, and like, where does it say that? Where's the hadith or the ayah that says ash-shaykhu yajibu an yalbis?
Right. Right.
It doesn't say anything like that. In fact, aslan, the thobe that you're wearing, the Prophet never wore a thobe like that. It was completely different. If you actually look at prophetic clothes, they were very different than what we assume are the prophetic clothes, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, this is actually a cultural practice. That same thobe that the Prophet was wearing is the same thobe that Abu Jahl was wearing.
Right.
It's very cultural. It has nothing to do with, as long as it covers the aura, it's appropriate. You know what I mean? It's not immodest, etc., etc. There's guidelines, yes. But outside of that, you'll realize, hey, wait a second, what I thought was Islamic or what Sheikh like that. Aslan, Ibn Taymiyyah himself was asked in his fatwa, by a person who was living in a predominantly non-Muslim country, at the time, which is very strange at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
He said, what should I wear? Should I wear the clothes from my back home or should I wear the clothes of the people? He said, as long as it's appropriate, wear the clothes of the people. You don't need to stand out.
Yeah.
Now, if a person wants to wear a thobe, ahlan wa sahlan, go ahead. I'm not going to be against that. I used to be like very much anti-thobe at one point, but I realized like it does have a utility. Like I was with a friend of mine, and because he was wearing a thobe, he was the only one who was wearing it. We got approached by a guy. He's like, hey, are you guys Muslim? He wouldn't have known that we were Muslim otherwise. Are you guys Muslim? Yeah. It's like, I've been looking for Muslims, blah, blah, blah. I've always wanted to ask some questions. We sat him down. We were at a restaurant. We sat him down with us. He ate with us. We're answering some of his questions. Later on, he came to the masjid, took his shahada.
MashaAllah.
And it was because of the thobe. If he didn't, now, obviously, the person, if Allah, if he was meant to be guided, he'll be guided, inshallah ta'ala. But
Sure.
It does have a utility. I understand that fully. But it's not, there's nothing to say that it is Islamic or anything like this. And to the contrary, you can wear something. Now, what happens to me is that when I dress like this and I go to a function, they're like, oh, are you the Jewish rabbi? I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah. So how do you understand these, how do you apply Islam in its modern or American context? Can you help me evaluate just to see how it is that you take certain issues and because if a person studied Islam in Medina, typically they come back wearing like the dress of Medina. If a person studied Islam in North Africa, they come back dressing like Maliki scholars. And so I feel like there's the component of customs isn't taken into account, the customs of a region.
Sure.
So how do you understand applying Islam here? How do you learn that?
Yeah, they can wear. There's nothing they can't.
No, I hear that. Yeah.
They can wear from North Africa. They can wear like Saudi Arabia. They can wear like whatever they want. You know what I mean? That's not a problem.
But it's. I'm thinking from the perspective of some guy out of Birmingham, Alabama, sees someone dressed that looks foreign, that looks different. He automatically might associate that with something bad because he doesn't understand it.
It's an other.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it isn't very conducive to the I don't know if you're a fan of the fiqh principle that Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah put out that says that the from the goals of the Islamic law is to attain what is good and complete it and to remove what is bad and minimize it.
Sure.
And some shuyukh understand that to apply today to look at Muslims and how they're living in non-Muslim lands, and they basically apply Islam with the context of ease. And also Imam al-Shatibi has this qaidat al-taysir,
sure,
that when he applies law, he looks at trying to make it as easy as possible.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how is it that
that's my philosophy as well.
Okay. So is this kind of your outlook when you try to understand Islam in America and how it's supposed to be practiced?
If we can make things easy on the people, we should. If we can make things easy on the people, we always should. I'm also the believer that as an imam or whoever, you shouldn't look different from the people that you're leading.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a congregation, 90% are wearing shirt and pants, and you know what I mean? Why do I have to look? There's not a uniform for a sheikh. You know what I mean?
Right.
People would come to the Prophet ﷺ in a gathering. They wouldn't know who's the Prophet. Or when they saw Umar later on, they didn't know who's the leader.
Yeah.
He's not dressed inherently different. And I'm not saying that we need to be dressed down. I'm just going to come to the masjid in a t-shirt and shorts and sandals and call it a day. There's an appropriateness. But the same thing, like if you look, I think we have an issue with we don't even dress up to the masjid anymore. When we should. It says, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. You should beautify yourself when you go to the masjid, especially on the day of Friday. The Prophet had separate clothes for Jumu'ah prayer than he did for every other day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'll come. Sometimes I would wear a suit and I'd come to Jumu'ah, and I'm not even giving the khutbah. I'm just coming to Jumu'ah, and people would be like, "Oh, are you the khatib today?" I'm like, "No." Like, "Oh, why are you dressed up?" And I'm like, "It's Friday, brother."
Yeah.
You're dressed in, sweatpants and a t-shirt. I can tell how important Friday is for you.
Yeah.
ذلك ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإن ذلك من تقوى القلوب. That the sha'ir, the rituals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained upon us, if we know how great they are, then that is a form of taqwa. And that's why I know that Friday, for example, is a sha'ira, it's a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
So if I show it its importance, especially to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is a form of taqwa, that I know that this is important, and I'm exemplifying that in my actions. That's what I should be doing.
I hear you. I want to dig into another topic, but I don't know if you have time. Should we close here?
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe we can close with this one then. Gender relations.
Okay.
How do you understand gender relations in Islam, especially in America where everything goes? I see that from this message, there's a little bit of a, not going to use the word progressive here, but forward thinking, forward thinking traditionalism.
Sure.
That, you don't need to hide the woman, put up, dividers and put them in a room and we can't see anything. It's a tinted glass, all this good stuff. How do you understand gender relations, especially because you worked in the MSA, you were part of the MSA,
yeah,
where typically things are much more lax. So how do you understand gender relations and what is allowed and not allowed, if you want to dig into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the authority on what is allowed and what is not.
No, but from your perspective is what I'm interested in.
Yeah. So here, at MIC, like you mentioned, I mean, this is a good exercise. Put yourself in the shoes of a sister.
Right.
You know what I mean? Do you want to come to the masjid where you're sitting in a room, you don't see the imam, you barely hear him, the microphone cuts out.
Of course.
They might give you like a little, small TV screen if you're lucky. Most places don't even have that, If they're technology capable, they'll put a little TV screen. I've had many sisters tell me in those masajid, those typical masajid are like this. Why am I going to come here to watch him on a tiny screen when I can do that at home? Yeah. And then at home, I don't have to wear hijab, I'm comfortable, etc., etc. You know what I mean? I'm not secluded. And a lot of times the room is dark, dingy, you know what I mean? It needs care, it needs maintenance. Why am I going to do that? I wouldn't do that. If I was a sister, I'd be the first one not to go to the masjid. And it seems as if we're kind of sending that message, we don't want you here. And we never want to send that, especially when people are we're begging, in essence. Mm-hmm. A lot of the masajid have the mentality to put off the vibe that they're begging people to come, which, okay, it is there. We want people to come to the masjid. We build all these beautiful buildings and then they're empty. La, we don't want this. We want people to come. If we want them to come, let us accommodate them as much as possible within what is allowed. Like, what did the Prophet's masjid have? Did it ever have a barrier or a partition, or putting them, in a secluded place where they don't have access? La, we don't believe in this. So we're trying to revive that prophetic tradition within boundaries, obviously. So we're not like praying shoulder to shoulder next to the sisters. Here, in the main prayer hall, in the regulated 5 daily prayers, if a sister comes and prays behind the men, that's not a problem. She'll come, she'll pray, she'll leave. And because but this was practiced at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That same sister is somebody's wife, she's somebody's sister, so we care for her. She's not now seen as an object like, oh, scandalous, why is she here? I know, she's somebody's mother, she's somebody's sister, she's somebody's, she has a family. She's not an object of, of lust or desire or whatever. She's here to worship. We're at a masjid. She's praying behind you. She's proper hijab. She'll pray. She'll leave. Ma'as salama. You know what I mean? And we have the upstairs for them as well. In fact, the upstairs here, the balcony, was actually put in at the request of the sisters, not the brothers. It delayed the project for about 9 months. Wow. In the initial plans, because you can see it, it's right here. Yeah. In the initial plans, we didn't actually have an upstairs. Sisters came and they said, look, on Friday especially, the sisters are going to be pushed way to the back, and so they wanted a way so that they can still be towards the front but upstairs. And we said, okay, that's fine. If that's what you guys want, that's what you guys want. So we added it later.
Yeah. Well, some folks would say that Muslim women are not supposed to pray in the masjid anyway, based on their understanding of a hadith.
Which is what?
The hadith that the best prayer for a woman is at home.
Okay.
So do you want to explain that for us maybe?
So from an Islamic paradigm, we don't just take solitary hadiths without understanding them completely comprehensively.
Right.
So there's another hadith that says, Ya ibadallah la tamna'u ima Allahi masajid Allah. O the servant of Allah, the male servants, do not prevent the female servants of Allah from the houses of Allah. This hadith was narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar. And Imam al-Nawawi, and also even before him, Imam Muslim, they put it in the chapter of adhering to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the permissibility of cutting off people if they don't adhere to this. So it's a weird chapter. You're like, what? So the chapter heading is in Riyadh Salihin, where he says that we're going to put it in this chapter. Why? Because the continuation of the hadith. So who narrates this hadith is Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar.
Right.
Abdullah ibn Umar lived to be very old. We know he died in his 80s. So he's one of the Mu'ammirin, one of the long Sahaba, and he consulted them, and this is why he saw a lot of the change and stuff. His son Bilal ibn Abdullah ibn Umar. So this is Umar's grandson and the son of Abdullah. He tells his own father, Wallahi inna lanamna'hun. He tells his dad, La, we will prevent them. He doesn't want his wife and his daughters to go to the masjid. And his father gets angry at him. His father's old. His father's like in his upper 70s at this point. And tells him, Aqulu lak, I tell you, قال Rasulullah sallam, وتقول لي إن لنمنعهن. I tell you what the messenger says, that you shouldn't prevent them. If they want to go to the masjid, they should be able to go to the masjid. And you're telling me, no, we will prevent them? How can you say this? He says, this is what I'm saying. He says, Wallahi inni la uhaddithuka ba'da hada. I'm not going to talk to you after this. For him, to reject something that the Prophet very clearly said. Now, does he have a reason? Did he argue with him the reason? He didn't argue with him the reason. Meaning he understands, sure, it might be more rewarding in certain circumstances for a woman to pray at home, according to that understanding of the hadith. Some scholars don't actually hold that opinion. There are scholars, I think it was like Shatib and some others, who said, it's actually, she gets the same reward as men, but it's preferable, meaning not more in reward, but it's preferable, etc., etc. And they have a way of understanding that hadith. But even then, he didn't even get into the details. He understands where he's coming from. He is a man. He has ghira. He doesn't want his woman to be seen. You know what I mean? He doesn't want people to stare at her, etc., etc. He has that ghira. That's excellent. He didn't argue with him over the ghira. What he did argue with him is that the Prophet ﷺ is saying you should not prevent them.
Yeah.
And you want to prevent them. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm not going to talk to you after this. For 5 years, father did not speak to his son. Abdullah ibn Umar stopped talking to his own son, and he died in that state.
Wow.
He never spoke to his son again over this hadith.
Wow.
So this is not a new, what I'm saying this, why? Because it's not a new issue. This is a very old issue. And for some reason, people have it it's very heated for them.
Yeah.
We're trying to apply the original prophetic, you know what I mean? We want to make it as accommodating as possible without bending our principles. So sisters are welcome to come. They attend. They can participate. They ask questions all the time. We try to make it as accommodating as possible because, wallahi, I don't know. I'm sure you've seen this. How many sisters are on the verge of leaving the deen because of the way that they were treated in a masjid?
For sure. How
many sisters have not only this, but they have an animosity against the masjid and anybody associated with the masjid? Many of the imams are like, oh, you imams, you mashayikh, you scholars, because of the issue of the masjid. They do have this. And to be honest, in a lot of cases, I don't blame them. Wallah, if I was a sister and I'm forced to pray in a closet, the cleaning closet, this has happened. Wallah, literally, I've seen this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where are you putting me? Are you serious right now? This is all we can do, sister. Yeah, this is all you want to do. You could do more, but you don't want to. Yeah. It takes that willpower.
For sure. Yeah, and just to add a little color, just another opinion. I believe Imam Ibn Hazm held the position that the reason for that hadith, it's not that it contradicts the other, but the one about that they should pray at home. But his position is that the Prophet was giving that directive towards the child rearing woman. And so that's his opinion on the situation. Just to stay on the same topic here, but another topic that I wanted to ask you about. What is allowed in Islam in terms of men and women that are non-mahram to each other? Obviously, khalwa is called out specifically, seclusion. That there's a hadith that when a man and a woman are alone in a room together, the third of them becomes the shaitan. However, the question is,
I was laughing because there was a married guy who heard the hadith he didn't hear the context. He just heard ما خلا رجل بامرأة إلا كان ثالثهما الشيطان. And he's like, that explains why my wife is always angry at me.
Wow.
Because he was assuming, that shaitan is there and he's the one who's
Uh-huh.
And then the sheikh had to tell him, la, this is, when they're not married. If they're married, there's no shaitan. It's like, yeah, sheikh, shaitan is there even when you're married. Because of the marital conflict that's happening.
Right, I hear you. So what's allowed in terms of okay, so some people hold the position that they shouldn't even look towards each other. They should not be in the same room together. So much so that one time a guest speaker was brought at an MSA event, and the way it was set up, right, is that men are on one side and women are on one side. The scholar comes and he's sitting at the front. He takes his chair, turns his back towards the woman, and faces the men. So I want to understand, is this something that you're supposed to do? You can't even look towards them. You have to face the men. Like, what if you can...
That's his opinion. That's his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, in everything, in a lot of these issues, especially the issue of this, gender relations, amrun ijtihadi. It is an ijtihadi issue, number one. Number two, yura'a fiha halun nas. The situation of the people should also be in consideration. Amja released a good paper on this topic. I read it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Sheikh Salah Slawi and many others, they expanded on it. The age of the people is important. The context, what's being done, what's the situation. All these things need to be taken into consideration when it comes to, for example, ikhtilat. Them, mixing the genders, mixing and whatnot.
Yeah.
Complete seclusion has a lot of cons, right? Complete free mixing, has a lot of cons as well. And Islam advocates kind of a middle path, right? There are obviously our marketplaces are all mixed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But there's certain decorum that's done. There's certain ways of behavior, etc., etc. If a person doesn't want to even look at the sisters, I understand where he's coming from. You know what I mean? He just doesn't want that temptation. He doesn't want to even look or even have a thought. Even just a remote thought even cross his mind. Some other people, that thought won't even cross their mind if they're talking, because they're you know what I mean, just their cultural background, their mindset, their mentality, it's not even going to happen.
But is it haram though? Is what I'm asking.
To what?
To look
at a woman?
Yes.
No. You know what I mean? Especially if she's properly covered.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to deal with her? How did the Prophet ﷺ deal with any woman who ever came and asked him a question?
For sure.
Did he not see her? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, there's a difference between a look and a look. 100%. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if I'm looking with a certain intention, that's on you. That's your intention. Mm-hmm. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, when he said, إِنَّمَا لَكَ الْأُولَى وَلَيْسَتْ لَكَ الثَّانِيَةِ. Inadvertently, he just saw a woman and she happened to be very beautiful and she was decorated, etc. He has no business with her, but he just saw her. He said, don't look again. The first you saw her, okay, khalas, now look away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I'm dealing with somebody and you know what I mean, they're asking a question, you know what I mean, I need something for them. Usually we used to teach this back, in the day, PPL. I don't know if you're familiar with the acronym. Meaning in gender relations, mm-hmm. It's public, purposeful, and limited.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not done in private, like you said, khalwa is haram. So it's in public. Public also means that there's somebody there that can do al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. So if I say, I went to a movie theater with her, and that's public, yeah, that's not public, bro. There's nobody there that's going to do amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. There's nobody that's going to stop you from doing something haram.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So public has to, has criteria. Purposeful, meaning there's a purpose. Why are you talking to this sister? Why is there like this gathering, etc., etc.? You know what I mean? It was funny to me. There's a masjid where people had issue with sisters coming to the masjid and participating, but they don't have issue that happening in like a business setting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact that in that scenario that you just mentioned earlier, the sisters on one side, the brothers on one side, right? There are some places they won't even allow that. The sisters have to be behind, or the sisters are not even invited. Because even sitting on the side is a problem. Or they'll put a partition. I understand. If you want to put a partition, I understand that. I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, the situation of the people has to be taken into consideration. You're dealing with people. A lot of these people that were putting the partition and stuff like this in their day-to-day life, when he's working in corporate America, or he's going to college, or he was in high school.
It doesn't reflect reality. Like there's one reality at the masjid, which is completely divergent from the reality that a Muslim lives.
some Muslims live, not all. You know what I mean? Like many Muslims, yeah, they'll have to. You'll have to deal with, you know what I mean, people of the opposite gender all the time. I understand that. That's not a problem. You know what I mean? All these things. This is why I'm saying the situation of the people has to be taken into consideration. We're not going to be opening up the door just because we say, oh, we live in America and everything is already freely mixed, so we're going to freely mix everything else. La. But at the same time, you know what I mean? This whole idea of walling them off, putting them in a separate room. If a sister, here's the thing. Ultimately, though, there are sisters who are more comfortable like that. I completely understand that. We should have that option available. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is why, like in our old building, we did have a door that was specific for the sisters. If the sister want to use that door, they can. And some sisters did. Majority didn't, but some sisters were more comfortable doing that. We have to accommodate these different tastes. Some sisters feel much better, you know what I mean, in that. And even to be honest, like even in our social gatherings, if I'm inviting friends over, typically the ladies will be sitting on one side and the guys will be sitting in another side or in another room. And I'll tell you, a lot of the guys feel more comfortable that way. You know what I mean? And I do too. I like that gather. Now, are we completely walled off? Like I'll never see anybody. I'll never see. You know, you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. But at the same time, there's this decorum. There's this, you know what I mean? We do understand that there has to be distance is there for a reason. And there's a lot of wisdom in it. This whole issue with like Me Too and, you know what I mean, harassment and people uncomfortable and people saying things that are inappropriate and people, you know what I mean, or people developing feelings for somebody else just because of proximity. This happens. So Islam is good in that it allows that middle path for these things not to happen. And we can be better off that way, inshallah.
I hear you. Jazakallah khair. But let's just pause for a second and then we can jump back in if we need to. 3, 2, 1. Okay, awesome. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. I think we should just stop here because I know you're running on a tight schedule, and man, it's freezing in here. And then we can inshallah, if there's another time that we can do this, let me know. Because we stopped. I didn't go into the other questions like what about touch? What about other things? What about a Muslim man that's trying to get married? Like what is allowed when he's courting the woman and all that good stuff? So inshallah, next time we can dig into that. So jazakallah khair for your time.
Inshallah.
I appreciate you inviting me, and I don't know. Did you want to have a closing thought?
Jazakallah khair. No. I wanted to, I hope your stay was good with us.
Oh, for sure.
You enjoyed Memphis.
For sure.
And inshallah ta'ala, we can have a future conversation. Inshallah ta'ala. Appreciate you bringing me on, and I hope it proves beneficial. Inshallah.
I'm sure it will. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Subhanakallah wa hamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakallah khair, and we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.